In my previous video, The Ghosts of Britain's Airfields, I explored the haunted histories of Montrose, Biggin Hill, Waltham and Bircham Newton. Places where echoes of wartime sacrifice seem to linger in the present. Since then, many of you have shared more stories, more sights, and more questions about strange phenomena linked to our skies. This episode is a companion piece, shaped by your suggestions. We'll return to Bomber County to explore RAF East Kirkby, where the legacy of air crews endures, and where some say their spirits do too. Then we'll visit RAF Cosford, where one of the aircraft on display is rumoured to bring more than just history with it. And finally, we'll head to the Peak District, where witnesses over the years have reported the sight of phantom planes flying low and vanishing before they can ever touch ground. These stories aren't about jump scares or special effects. They're about memory, mystery, and the way some places, some machines even, seem to hold on to the past a little more tightly than others. So join me again as we listen to the haunted skies and the whispers they still carry. Just off the quiet A155 in rural Lincolnshire lies a stretch of tarmac and grass that once echoed with the roar of Lancaster bombers, RAF East Kirkby. Officially opened in August 1943, this former bomber command station saw the comings and goings of numbers 57 and 630 squadrons during some of the most perilous operations of the Second World War. Today, the airfield is home to the Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Centre and to a carefully preserved Avro Lancaster Mark VII, affectionately known as Just Jane. But many who visit this place believe the echoes of war didn't stop when the aircraft engines fell silent. They believe East Kirkby still hums with something else, something left behind. The airfield is no stranger to the paranormal. RAF East Kirkby features in no fewer than 4 of Bruce Barrymore Halpenny's Ghost Stations books. It was at the heart of Squadron Leader Jack Curry's haunting 1986 BBC documentary, The Watchtower, and it was the focus of a 2003 episode of Most Haunted. The focal point of most ghost stories here is the control tower, the very heart of any airfield in wartime. Within its walls were the watch office, the duty pilot's restroom, the switch room, meteorological and control offices, vital spaces, alive with tension and decision during every operation. Thanks to the dedication of the Panton family and the Heritage Centre, the building has been restored to its wartime appearance. But some believe its past still lingers. Fred Panton, one of the brothers behind the centre, grew up a few miles from the base. As a child, he witnessed the tragic aftermath of a Flying Fortress crash near East Kirkby, a fatal accident when a struggling American bomber failed twice to land safely. Years later, Fred recalled seeing a tall man walking towards the tower, carrying what looked like an armful of bags. Only later did he realise that what he'd seen wasn't luggage, but the unmistakable shape of a man carrying a parachute. That same figure was reported multiple times, always heading toward the Watchtower. Said by some to be a crew member from the crashed fortress, the building's careful restoration seemed, oddly, to bring those sightings to an end. But the reports of other activity continued. In 1983, a visitor saw a group of men in full flying gear striding toward the tower. Hoping to ask them about the site, he approached, only to see pale, featureless ovals where their faces should have been. In 1989, a couple exploring the tower felt an unmistakable presence behind them, something that seemed to lean in and read the exhibits over their shoulders. The sensation wasn't malevolent, but it was uncomfortable, and they soon left feeling uneasy and rattled. In 1991, a group of visitors were startled by the sound of telephones ringing from the control room. Telephones that weren't connected to any lines or even to a power source. The following year, in 1992, a green light was seen glowing within the tower at night, long after the gates had been locked and the site closed. The tower, at that point, had no electricity. And in 1993, a woman touring the tower with friends was disturbed by the piercing sound of an old-fashioned phone ringing nearby. The noise became unbearable. But when she mentioned it, she discovered that no one else had heard a thing. Are these experiences tricks of memory, echoes of trauma, or something less easily explained? I visited the Heritage Centre on a clear, sunlit day. I wandered through the carefully restored Watchtower and stood beside Just Jane as her mighty engines roared to life. Nothing felt unusual or unsettling. Then I thought of the fear, the hope, and the weight carried by the crews who once passed through here, taking to enemy skies and never certain of return. And with that in mind, it's not hard to understand why some believe that part of them might still remain. Ripples from the past and echoes in time, the old RAF East Kirkby is more than a museum. It's a place where history breathes, and sometimes, it seems, where the past still walks quietly alongside us. From Lincolnshire, our journey now moves west to Shropshire and RAF Cosford. Unlike East Kirkby, which lives in memory as a once-active wartime base, Cosford is very much alive, a working military station and home to one of the country's most important aviation museums. Established in 1938 as a technical training centre for RAF personnel, Cosford played a critical role in shaping the ground crews who kept Britain's warplanes in the sky. It saw the comings and goings of a range of planes, and for decades the base thrummed with the noise of engines and drills. After the war, Cosford continued as a training hub, and later became the permanent home of the RAF Museum's Midlands collection, housing some of the rarest and most historically significant aircraft in the UK. But even in this modern setting where aircraft are preserved, catalogued and curated, the past can still intrude. Among the museum's collection is one plane that seems to have brought something else with it, not just history, but a haunting. This is the Avro Lincoln RF 398, a vast and imposing post-war bomber that never saw action, but has become the centre of one of Britain's most persistent aviation ghost stories. When I visited the aircraft myself, I was struck by its sheer presence. Its size, yes, but also its stillness, its solemnity. The Lincoln sits among giants, a Wellington bomber ribbed and reconstructed to show its geodetic frame, a Spitfire, sleek and battle-worn in appearance even after decades at rest. Each plane carries its own history, the weight of conflict and the memory of those who flew them. In such a place, heavy with the legacy of war and sacrifice, is it really so surprising that some visitors speak of ghostly echoes from the past? As I walked through the hangar, I wasn't alone in wandering. I overheard other visitors trading hushed remarks about RF 398. A whisper of a haunting, a shared glance toward the shadow beneath its wings. No mysterious figures revealed themselves to me, but the air did feel charged with something. A reverence, perhaps, or the kind of silence that invites stories to take shape. The tale of the Lincoln's haunting dates back to its arrival at Cosford in 1977. Almost immediately, stories began to circulate among the engineers tasked with its care. One, named John Small, would later recount strange sightings around the aircraft, describing a shadowy figure in flight gear seen aboard the plane when no one was supposed to be there. Others spoke of whistling sounds, sudden drops in temperature, and inexplicable heat. Visitors reporting that the hangar was too warm during winter days, even when no heating was in use. BBC Midlands reporter Maureen Carter was filming a segment at the museum in November 1979 when she captured something strange, a face visible only in the footage, not noticed at the time of recording. She and her film crew returned later that week to try and recreate the shot and, as a local paper described it, coax the ghost to make a return visit. Reports continued throughout the 1980s and, in 1991, a visitor released a photograph taken by his son 3 years earlier, purporting to show a ghostly face in the rear turret of the bomber. Gwyn Richards and Ivan Spenceley investigated the tale for BBC Radio 4's Strange Stories that same year. They claimed to have captured the sound of mechanical movements, of switches perhaps, or the clink of tools coming from within the plane. Noises some likened to the preparations of a bomber crew readying for flight. And yet, this haunting might have more earthbound origins than one might expect. John Small and his fellow engineer, Richard Garside, would later claim that the ghost story was deliberately invented. Concerned that RF 398 might be moved to another museum site at Manchester, the team began circulating the idea that the aircraft was haunted, hoping to attract public interest and secure its future at Cosford. If the story kept visitors coming, perhaps the Lincoln would be allowed to stay. But even as the origins of the legend became clearer, the sightings did not stop. So what are we left with? A ghost invented to protect a plane and then brought to life by the power of belief? Or something deeper? Something genuinely mysterious taking root in the shadow of a machine built for war, housed in a hangar filled with echoes of the past? Whatever the answer, the story of RF 398 endures. It lives in whispered conversations between museum goers, in curious glances at cockpit windows, in the knowing smiles of those who say they felt something strange. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the engineers really gave the Lincoln. Not a ghost, but a place in living memory. Of course, not every ghost story is grounded. Some don't belong to crumbling runways or abandoned control towers. Some haunt the skies themselves. From the quiet hangars of Shropshire, we head north and east, leaving behind the orderly exhibits of Cosford, and watch the land begin to change. The flatness of the lowlands gives way to rising slopes and steepening skies, the air cooler, the light a little wilder. This is the edge of the Peak District. Gritstone crags, narrow valleys, and moorlands that roll out under a vast, watchful sky. It's a place where wind scours stone and silence feels deeper than elsewhere. And scattered through the villages of Glossop and Hope, across the high ground around Ladybower Reservoir and the haunting silhouette of the Derwent Dams, stories take flight. Strange ones. Tales of silent aircraft gliding low over treetops before disappearing into thin air. Of phantom bombers returning home decades too late. Of echoes in the clouds, never quite fading. Here, the ghosts don't linger on the ground. They fly. Not far from the village of Hope, a quiet afternoon walk in the spring of 1995 turned into something far stranger. Tony Ingle, a holidaymaker staying at a local caravan park, had taken his golden retriever for a walk along Aston Lane, an ordinary country path lined with hedgerows and sheepfields. The day was calm, bright, and peaceful. Then, without warning, a large plane appeared overhead. It was unmistakably vintage, propeller-driven, Second World War in design, and it was flying low, perhaps no more than 50 or 60 feet above the lane. Tony watched as it banked, its propellers spinning, but there was no sound. Not even the whisper of engines. Just silence. As the plane dipped behind a nearby hedge, Tony expected to hear a crash, see smoke, something. But when he ran ahead to look, the field beyond contained nothing but sheep. He later described the eerie quiet as the kind of silence you only notice when something feels wrong. His dog, usually unbothered, refused to go near the field again. On future walks, it would dig in its paws or slip its collar altogether to avoid that stretch of land. Tony wasn't alone in his experience. Similar sightings have been reported throughout the region. Accounts of silent wartime aircraft vanishing before impact, of planes that never crash, but also never seem to land. Some resemble Wellingtons, others Dakotas. None, according to the records, should have been flying at the time, or in those places. What Tony saw that day remains a mystery, but in the hills and skies above the peaks, it's far from unique. Just 2 years later, in March 1997, something stirred the skies above Ladybower. It began with a blinding flash, and dozens of witnesses across the Derwent Valley reported seeing what looked like a low-flying aircraft plunge toward the high moors above the reservoir. Some spoke of flames or a fiery trail, others described billowing smoke rising from the hills. Concerned residents flooded local emergency lines. Police, tracker dogs, mountain rescue teams, and even a helicopter attended the scene. They scoured the area well into the evening, but found nothing. No wreckage, no impact site, no aircraft unaccounted for. The incident made the local and national press. The Matlock Mercury, the Buxton Advertiser, the Express. These weren't lone eccentrics chasing lights in the dark. These were multiple, credible sightings of something dramatic and seemingly real. And yet, like so many tales in these hills, the story ended with nothing more than silence and unanswered questions. Perhaps what was seen that March day was a trick of the light, or a meteor mistaken for metal. But for those who were there, it feels like something else. Something older. Something that refuses to come down. The same strangeness hangs over the recurring sightings of a phantom Lancaster bomber that's been reported in the area for more than 30 years. One couple driving through the Derwent Valley late at night saw it pass low over the Ladybower Reservoir. They knew what they were seeing, the distinctive shape, the 4 engines, the purposeful flight path, a Lancaster. But as it drew close, it simply vanished. No banking turn, no retreating roar. One moment it was there, solid and seemingly real. The next, it was gone. To them, it felt less like a haunting and more like a breach in time, a glimpse into something not quite finished. And maybe that makes sense. The Peak District isn't just a scenic backdrop for the Dam Buster legend. It's part of the fabric of that story, and it's soaked in others far more tragic. A Bolton Paul Defiant crashed here in August 1941, killing both men aboard. A Lancaster from 408 Squadron came down on the 18th of May 1945. 6 crew were killed. A Dakota, lost in July of the same year, took 7 more lives. And in 1948, a US Air Force B-29 Superfortress slammed into the hills, killing all 13 on board. These aren't the footnotes of history. They are scars on the land. Out here, memory clings like the fog, and it's not hard to believe that some of those final flights still echo overhead, not quite ready to fade. Maybe what haunts us in these stories isn't just what's unexplained, but what feels unresolved, as if something is still moving above the moors, trying to find its way home. These stories of haunted hangars, ghostly airmen and phantom planes cling to their settings as tightly as morning mist. They rise from the concrete floors of old RAF bases, drift through the vaulted silence of museums, and circle over the valleys and ridgelines of the Peak District, never quite settling, never quite fading. What do we make of them? Skeptics will say memory plays tricks, that atmospheric conditions, wishful thinking or tricks of light account for the sightings, that stories take on lives of their own, like the engineers at Cosford spinning yarns to keep a plane in place, only to find their tale outgrew them. Others, more open to mystery, might suggest that places touched by intense history hold on to something of it, that moments of fear, hope or sacrifice echo longer than we expect, and that under the right conditions, the time of day, cast of light, slant of memory, those echoes might become something more. Whether born of longing, imagination or the supernatural, these tales endure because they speak to something deep in us, a recognition that the past is not always left behind. Memory can hang in the air like vapour trails, and history sometimes flies a little closer than we expect. And so we listen. We watch the skies. We pause by hangars and airfields and moorland ridges with that quiet, electric feeling that we are not entirely alone. After all, in places like these, where war once rumbled across the skies, where brave men left and often did not return, it's no surprise that some part of them might still be flying. If you've enjoyed this journey through haunted skies and hidden histories, please like, subscribe and share the video. Thank you for watching.